Awesome.
Okay, hopefully we're live now. If you guys can hear us in the outside chat pretty decently, let us know. I have done something different. I'm doing OBS on a computer that I built. That's a four-quad system using Linux out of the living room. So let me know. Feedback, and that's for me. Okay, there we go. So I'm trying something new. Let me know if it works. And I got Cirrus and I got Heretic Woman in here. And I wanted to have a hangout because I'm having existential angst. Because recently, I'm not even kidding. This is not satire. This is not like to be funny. I literally have had at least 6, 7, maybe even 8 people or more tell me that they don't believe that I exist. Matter of fact, one person just a few minutes ago on Twitter says, well, I don't believe that you exist, but I don't believe that you don't exist. I'm like, so you're agnostic on my existence. Okay. And I kind of want to get to the bottom of this because I'm either having an existential crisis, or I'm thinking more than likely people are not understanding what it means to have beliefs. And I think their epistemology is kind of messed up because we all have beliefs, and there's nothing wrong with having beliefs. And to say that you don't believe somebody exists because you don't hold a belief that they exist, and at the same time having a conversation with them, I think that is a contradiction of sorts. That's either a performance contradiction, or at the very least, it's a belief act that you're pretending that that person believes. You're believing that you're believing the act, or you're doing something actual, because that person, to have a conversation with, you have to at least presuppose they exist. I mean, wouldn't you? So I kind of wanted to talk about that and ask you guys is why people have such a hard time saying things like, I believe that you exist. Why are they so fearful of that word belief? Now, I understand that word is laden with things with religion and theology, and the theists love that word belief. It's if you have belief, then you're just a faith. No. If you know something, you also believe it. One is incorporated in the other. It is a fact that if you believe something, you must also, if you know something, you must also believe it as well, because knowledge entails belief. Knowledge is a subset of belief. And every tripartite theory of knowledge, every single one of them I've ever seen, one of the conditions to say you have knowledge is you believe it. So one of the three things, it was S believes P, means the subject believes P. P is true, and it's justified, or in some other cases, it's produced by reliably produced methods, like reliable produced belief. So let's start with Cirrus. Cirrus, you believe that I exist, or you don't believe that I exist?
I would say that I have sufficient evidence to believe that you exist.
Okay, but can you just give me a straight yes or no? Do you believe that I exist?
Yes.
Okay. Heretic Woman, do you believe that I exist?
I do.
Okay. So I have 2 people in here that believe that I exist. So my existential angst is over. So I'm good with that.
Good hangout, everybody.
Thanks for joining, people. Yeah, existential crises don't last too long, especially when you pretty much know that the problem is on the fault of somebody else. Because I do know that I exist. As a matter of fact, I do believe very strongly the only thing you can know for absolute certainty like that is that you do exist. I think it's self-refuting to say I may not exist. If I may not exist, then how am I even having the thought about my own existence? And I'm not trying to do like a Descartes thing, but there is something to be said from if I can even ponder my own existence, then it seems rational to me to believe that I exist. But is it rational to have a conversation with somebody? Can you have a belief act? Like, for example, if I say, well, you know what, I don't have any beliefs, and so therefore, sirs, I don't have a belief that you exist, but I'm still having a conversation with you. Is that rational? I think no. I think you're having a problem there because you are literally having a conversation with somebody that you do not hold a belief that exists. To me, that is irrational.
Well, and now that makes me wonder, is it possible that any or all of the people who say they don't believe you exist have issues with hallucinations?
No, these are people that are not solipsists.
It's not really that. It's an issue of epistemology.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I just wanted to rule that out.
These are normal people. These are people just everyday Joe Schmuckatellis, but they don't understand epistemology very well.
Right.
And by the way, thank you for the super chat. Give it up, McCrae. We know the truth now. You're a hologram invented by NASA to lie about the shape of the Earth. if that was the truth, then I'd be having it in a much bigger place than I am now.
Well, and he would be holographic at the moment and not,
I have physical substance. I can pick things up. I mean, I'm picking up my water, so.
If Steve was actually a hologram, would he choose to look the way he does?
There's that.
I'm gorgeous. Don't hate, man. My hair is perfectly straight, man. I mean, it's lovely.
If I was a hologram, I would choose to look anything else than what I look like.
That's
because
understandable.
I look fucking horrible. This is why I hide behind a cartoon avatar.
I gotta get me a cartoon avatar too. I think everybody should have a cartoon avatar. So yeah, like I said, these people are not solipsists. This is not a question of people that just don't believe other external minds exist. They know external minds exist, but at the same time, they're having this weird type of epistemology where they think it's okay where you can know something but not believe it. So they know that I exist. They'll say, Steve, yeah, we know that you exist, but we have no beliefs. We don't believe that you exist. Well, that's a problem because there is no theory of knowledge out there that allows for that. It's just irrational to say I know X to be true, but at the same time I don't believe B is true. You have to believe P to know it.
At that point, I would have to wonder: do those people also think you can choose your beliefs?
That's a good question. You know what? I haven't asked any of them that. That's a great question because that's actually a very similar question that Shannon Q and Paulogia had asked in the questions we had asked the Christian things. If you can't choose your beliefs, how you're accountable for them, and of course most of that was lost upon many of them. Who was it? Heather? Was that her name? Heather? Really nice woman, but did not understand what that meant by you don't choose your beliefs. Now Myself, I tend to go to Dostastic involuntarism. I don't think we choose our beliefs. I think that our beliefs kind of choose us. Max says, Max paid me $10 to get kicked out of my Hangout. That's awesome. Max, I love you. He was having mic issues, and I had to go on air, and I couldn't fuck with it very longer. So I just did an asshole thing, and I removed him. But I love Max. That's why I knew he wouldn't worry about it. Because he needs to get a computer. Your phone doesn't work for it, dude. He says,
I think...
Well, let me read the super chat because he said, even though he kicked me out because of audio, but yeah, we know he's actually a hologram that is there to hide the fact that he's actually Walt Disney pushing an Illuminati agenda. Wake up, people. Yeah, I'm not related to Disney.
Now, see, the sad part is you can probably get somebody to believe that.
Well, not those people. You can't get them to believe anything. Again, it's not just me. They don't believe you exist. I can't get them to say, I believe Santa does not exist. They cannot. They won't say it. They'll rationalize it. They'll spend 15 minutes trying to say, well, I have no belief that Santa doesn't exist one way or another, but I know that the Santa that's anthropomorphized as this jolly old man that flies around on sled Christmas Eve, that doesn't exist. But they don't say, I believe that Santa does not exist. It's strange.
Well, I kind of get why they might do that. Because, like you said earlier, the word belief has a lot of religious baggage attached to it. And for people like myself who do a lot of debating with various flavors of theists love to glom on to things like that and twist meanings to their own use.
It's and one of the things, a well fallacy.
Exactly. And so what they love to do is if you say I believe something, oh, well, that's faith, and it's like, well, no, that's not what I mean.
But
and so
do we sacrifice proper like understanding of philosophy and epistemology because
you
of
shouldn't.
That? You shouldn't, right? We don't do it for
shouldn't.
science.
But see, now I've been in that situation myself where I'm talking with someone where I know damn well that if I utter the word belief or I believe, they're going to totally screw it up. And so I won't go as far as to say I don't believe, in quotes, anything, but I have avoided using the word. I've rephrased my statement to avoid using the word because I know what they're going to do with it. And I don't want to waste time going down that rabbit hole because once they get onto it, half the time it doesn't matter if you beat them over the head with a clue bat, they're not going to let go.
All right,
and it's not worth the trouble.
Let's do a kind of a role play. Let's see what we can do to get by that. If you run into that again, what happens if a theist does that, right? So if they want to equivocate belief in faith, now most of us realize that they're not the same thing. The way a theist is using faith, they're using it really the biblical way, which is more, things that have not seen but yet hope for. We're using the word belief epistemologically.
And before you get there too, even faith it can be used. Like you can say, I have faith in you, Steve.
That's confidence.
Yes, exactly. That's confidence. But the theist won't allow for that definition. They'll be like, faith is faith. And like poor Aaron, that debate he had with Matt Slick 2 or 3 years ago. That's exactly what happened. Slick kept being like, no, you said faith and that means God, like that kind of shit. And Aaron just got fed up after about 20 minutes and booked it because there was,
Can't
Slick
have a
was never
conversation
going to.
anymore.
Yeah, there was no conversation because Slick thought he had a gotcha moment and he wasn't going to let up. So
And the whole
faith,
time, Slick is just chasing a red herring.
yes.
Yeah, no,
So,
I
but yeah.
get that. I get that. Look, but this is what we should do. This
Okay.
is when you have those kind of situations, because when you know somebody's being that dishonest, and I've talked to Slick, and although he can be very friendly and congenial, when it comes to these types of topics, I think he's very slick and very.
Oh,
Slippery.
his name is very apropos. Put it that
Extremely.
way.
So when a theist does that, all you have to do is, and what I would do is, when I have that happen, is I say, look, I believe things to be true. And that just means that I have a position that comports with reality, if you're what's called a coherentist, or at least that I'm holding that position to be true. Now, I have it on some kind of justification that I do that. There has to be some justificatory reasons. Some people use evidentialism, or especially empiricism, saying that I have evidence that gives me reason to believe that P is true. That's fine. That's not faith, okay? You have reason. The way the religious person is using faith, it's actually without justification. It's I have faith and I have hope with no justification because I want to believe something to be true. I want to believe that God exists. I don't need justification for that, according to them. They want you to believe. That's a huge difference there. So
yeah.
all you got to do is say, especially when you know something, like do you believe that 1 + 1 is 2? Well, yeah, I believe 1 + 1 is 2 because I know 1 + 1 is 2. So I'll tell them,
Yes.
the fact that I know 1 + 1 is 2, therefore it entails 1 + 1 I also believe is true.
You can't know something and then not believe it.
Correct. And that
You can
usually
believe
curbs that
something without
discussion.
knowing. You can believe without knowing, but you can't know without believing.
Yes, I can believe it and be wrong. Beliefs can be wrong. Knowledge can't be wrong. Matter of fact, I did a blog on that just recently on the principle of attribution and retraction of how beliefs can be wrong. And I could look back and say, hey, I had a bad belief and my belief was wrong. But I can never look back and say, hey, my knowledge was wrong. My knowledge always has to be true. I was wrong about the belief that my knowledge was true, but my knowledge itself cannot be wrong.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hard time. People have a hard time wrapping their heads around that. Knowledge cannot be wrong. You can never have false knowledge. You can only have false beliefs.
So your belief that you have knowledge could be wrong,
Correct.
but the actual knowledge cannot be. Okay,
Knowledge,
yeah,
by
that
definition,
makes
must be
sense.
true.
Right.
You can believe in young Earth creation and think that you know all the evidence for it, and you might know all the evidence for young Earth creation, but that really means you know nothing, and so your belief is wrong.
This is true. And by the way, yeah. If you know a lot about young Earth creation, you really know a lot about nothing. Side tangent, because that's what we do in the Great Debate community, especially on my channel.
Talking about you, Ken Ham.
Coming for you, Ken. I did challenge TTOR, but no word back from him. So if you guys can maybe reach out to TTOR, and if he wants to take me up on his challenge, or my challenge to him, because he attributed a lot of things to me which was just bullshit that were wrong. And I was like, look, dude, if you want to put words in my mouth, at least come talk to me and I could tell you my position, but don't assume my position because you got it all wrong. He says I said things that I've never said. I've never, ever in 5 years that I've had my YouTube channel that macroevolution requires millions of years. It does happen over millions of years. It also happens over a couple of days. It can happen over one generation. So
well, that's why they study fruit flies, because they go pretty quick.
So
yeah,
fruit flies and mayflies. I mean, like by necessity, they have to do macro over a very quick amount of time.
Correct.
That's all they got.
But he was attributing these weird things to me, and he had a video out on me. I'm a bad liar about evolution, and I am just constantly promoting evolution, even though I'm getting it all wrong, and evolution's all wrong. And I'm like, okay, why don't you come tell me why it's wrong? Because his argument is all from arguments from incredulity. But anyways, if you want people that want in, let me know. I'll try to get you the link. I know certain people want in, but I'm trying to keep this kind of small, so I'm only having certain people to come in.
Steve only wants the people who know he exists.
That would be preferable. No, actually, you know what? I wouldn't mind if one of the Twitter people came in that they're putting forth this narrative that they don't believe that I exist.
And maybe explain their position a little better.
Right.
I would absolutely love to hear it, because I know it's not solipsism, but it sounds like solipsism.
And that's what I tell them. That's the problem. Here it is. When you tell people that you don't believe that they exist, you literally are putting forth a solipsistic type position. You may not be a solipsist, but to that person listening to that, that's what I would get out of it. Would you not?
That's the first thing that I latched onto, was that it was solipsism.
But they're not solipsist.
Exactly.
That's why it's such an irrational, strange position, because they're.
But how would you know that? It's just brain fizz in a vat.
But you could be a brain in a vat. And no, I don't believe you could be a brain in a vat. I do think Hillary Putnam has a good art.
Well, so even if you are a brain in a vat, though, even if that were true, if we were to grant that were true, you'd still exist.
Yeah, well, I mean, you still exist in some form, right? I mean, we always talk about maps and territories. As a matter of fact, I just wrote another blog, and I haven't put it out yet because I don't know how good it is. Maybe I'll send it to Cirrus if it makes sense to you, because it was a little bit sophistic, and I don't usually do that, but I decided to try my hand at it. But, you know, when we look at the reality, we never directly see the reality. What we see is a perception of reality. What we see is what we call the map of the territory. We never actually see the territory. You have no access epistemically to reality beyond your own perceptions. So we have a framework of our perceptions, that we have a web of beliefs. And I'm going to dive into the coherentist position, because they believe that all beliefs have this kind of tight web. And that when you have a belief that conforms with your web, you can justify it. When you don't, you throw it out. Like, for example, young earth creationism would not be in the web of my beliefs, because it's so removed from all my beliefs, so it doesn't fit that narrative. So that I can reject that belief. But we never actually see reality, and so people often confuse the map with the territory, as the expression goes, and they say, "Oh, what I'm seeing is reality." Well, no, you're not. You're perceiving what you think is reality, but you have no idea. We can never know that, and that actually comes to the whole process of what's called existentialism, and this human need to want to have meaning and void what's called angst. I was having that for a little while, this existential dread and angst that maybe I don't exist. That didn't last too long. But I'm confident now that I do. What's that?
Starting to let him get to you, Steve.
Well, it's so funny because, like I said, I really tried to get them to understand it. So maybe you guys can help me, because I'm not trying to be a dick about it to them, but I want them to realize how irrational their position is. And I mean, it is irrational. To me, it's very irrational to have a position where you have a belief act that you're talking to somebody, and at the same time don't believe they exist. Somebody asked me earlier, and I didn't mention it, by the way. No, I don't believe in philosophical zombies. I wouldn't know how you would even, how would you even determine somebody to be a philosophical zombie?
I was going to say, what the hell is a philosophical zombie?
A P-zombie? A philosophical zombie is basically, if I was talking to you, and you were just a automatron. You had no soul, or what, colloquially soul. You had no consciousness.
Oh, like one of those talking sex robots.
But you are you. You are you.
Yeah. Okay.
I have no way of knowing that you are an independent mind like that you exist, that you have consciousness. So a P-zombie was somebody that can emulate that exactly. And how would you notice the difference?
Well, yeah.
It sounds like it would make for an interesting science fiction, but I think I've already heard that story in Fallout 4.
Yeah, they don't. You don't have any. They don't have qualia, which is called qualia, as Shannon points out.
So your natural state would emulate something robotic, and the other person wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, they have what's called qualia or sense of consciousness. They're not an actual, what we would consider a living entity. They're just.
Well, if you're
it's not an artificial intelligence, because it's different. Artificial intelligence and P-zombies do different things, but what?
But if you have consciousness, how could you not?
Well, you wouldn't have consciousness. How would I know you have a consciousness?
Sorry, I meant the other way around. If you don't have consciousness, how could you be you?
Well, because you're still, from my perspective, you're still you, whether you have a consciousness or not. All I'm saying is the
Okay.
external factors that you're putting forth. The words you say, the mannerisms you have, the actions you take won't
Okay,
change whether
so
you have a
if I
conscience or
act,
not. To me,
if
if you're
I
a
act
P-zombie.
exactly like this, but I don't act, I'm not actually self-aware, you would have no way of knowing
Correct.
that.
You are not. You wouldn't be self-aware if you're a P-zombie.
Okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
that makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, it makes sense in the sense that it is now explained.
But I also
Yes.
think that I also use the term, and probably inappropriately, but people that don't have any beliefs, I kind of kid them and call them a P-zombie because I don't know how you could ever make an argument that you have no beliefs. It makes no sense. Max says
Yeah.
philosophical zombies are real life NPCs.
Or real life
Yeah,
NPCs.
exactly. Yeah, they're quest givers. Yeah.
I just walk outside and I'm like, okay, let me see if I can find the yellow exclamation mark. Ah, there they are. There's
Again,
the P-zombie.
side thing. Doesn't it suck when you're doing a quest and you turn it in and they give you all this praise and you turn around and some motherfucker's just doing the same thing and they're giving him praise too? It's like, wait a minute here, man. I thought it was important, but nope.
Yeah, that's one of the main detractions from MMOs. I personally love MMOs, but I think it's better when the NPC has like sort of an instance-based thing where when you're talking to them, the NPC will respond to you and you can't see that they're responding to anybody else.
They have things like that. They have instances where they have phasing now, and so
Yeah,
it's
that's
only,
yeah, it's called instancing, and it's something that I've seen in like Warcraft and other games recently. But in the early form of MMOs, they didn't have that. You just went to the NPC and they were like, "Thank you for saving the place." Then you'd go away and you'd hear it like 5 more times.
Exactly, and you're like, "Damn it!"
Oh, because somebody was behind you. Talking
Yeah,
to
like
you.
you are the
Okay.
hero of Astaroth. You've saved the world. And the next person comes along. You are the hero of
You're the
Astaroth.
hero.
You've saved the world. You're like, didn't I just do that shit?
Yeah, that would be a little disconcerting. A little like,
Yeah,
damn
it's
it,
one of
I
the
thought
things
I was special.
It's one of the things that can kill immersion, but that's going on a huge tangent. But you could, well, actually, no, not really. Immersion is actually one of the things that you would use to determine whether or not you may or may not exist, I guess.
Hey, but wait, bye to Shannon. She has to go back to work because she exists.
Hi, Shannon.
Goodbye, person who exists.
Yeah,
But
you know,
do I?
I've been really liking Witcher 3 because the immersion on that is great, right? I mean, Witcher 3 is probably the greatest game ever made as far as that. I mean, as far as everything. It's just such a well-made game. It took 3 years to make that game.
I'd just like to point out that I don't play games like that.
Oh, try Witcher 3. I don't know how they got all the voice acting done in 3 years. It's
So I
immense.
used to play. I don't know if you guys remember a game called Rift a few years ago.
Yes.
I was working customer service for them, and I had to train people how to DM that game, and I never played MMOs, so I got paid to play that game, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that when I was done training it, I got some time off and I sat and played it for 3 days solid and went, wow, this isn't good. And I stay the hell away from games like that.
I heard Rift is pretty good. I haven't tried it yet, though. I mean, it's going to take me
I
quite a long time to
played
finish
it.
what I'm
Like,
playing now. 'Cause I don't
They
play that much.
wanted it to be a competitor for WoW, and I don't think they quite understood just how ingrained the following and culture of WoW was, because
Not to mention, it's a Skinner box.
okay, I don't understand that, but that's okay.
Refresh my memory on the Skinner box.
Do you need me to explain, Steve?
I remember, but I just
So the concept of a Skinner box, of the Skinner box, there was a psychological experiment done on, I think it was either pigeons or rats, but they had them. It was a guy whose last name was Skinner. That's why we call it the Skinner box.
Yeah,
But he put them in a
I
box,
know what it is.
and he gave them a set of tasks to do, and every time they got a task done, they would receive a reward. Like, here's a little food tablet. But he would make it to where the first time they could do one task to get that food tablet. The second time they'd have to do 2 tasks to get that food tablet, up until the point where the animal would have to do several tasks one after another to get the same type of food tablet, to get the same amount of enjoyment. The idea of a Skinner box is not unlike a badly made MMORPG, where you're doing the same task over and over again. It's just to get that level up. So to get that food tablet, you are having to do more and more of the exact same
That makes
tasks.
sense.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
to get the
almost
reward.
never-ending.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're leveling up and you're doing all the questing, I mean, you're doing more and more and more to get that effect.
Yes,
The
and you
reward.
can alleviate the Skinner box problem by giving what's called intrinsic rewards, where you're not like in Witcher. you're not just doing the quest because you want to get that new dagger that comes from the quest. You're also doing it because you're actually interested in the story. You're interested in seeing what's going there.
Right.
The dagger's the extrinsic reward, which would be the food tablet, but the experience is the intrinsic reward. The difference between a Skinner box and a good game is a Skinner box only has extrinsic reward. A good game actually has both. It gives
the
you
rewards aren't that great in Witcher 3. I mean, I'm doing it for the experience. It's just fun. I don't think that the rewards you get are that big a deal or make that big a deal.
No, but it's the experience of immersing yourself in the world. That's what separates it from a Skinner box. You're doing the same actions that a Skinner box would have, but you're having intrinsic reward, and that's the thing that differentiates it.
So, what do you think of simulation theory? That this is all just one huge video game? Because I think it's a bunch of crap myself.
I think
me too.
I think that if it were true, and I don't subscribe to it, but if it were true, we would still have to operate as if it weren't true, so it makes the entire idea useless.
But here's something interesting for you. I think we all agree, obviously, when you're playing a video game, there's no moral responsibility. It's a morally inert system. When you go kill somebody, you're not held morally responsible. No, that doesn't make you an evil person.
There's actually a couple games where I disagree with you on that one.
Okay, well, I don't think there's any game where you can make an argument where you have moral responsibility.
Not real moral responsibility, but a game that
yeah.
gives you a good sense of it, I would say.
Two different things. We're not held accountable. If you kill somebody in a video game, you're not held accountable for it. There's no retribution for it. There's no retaliation. There's no penance to be paid. There's no forgiveness. There's nothing. It's morally inert. So
no, not in a true sense. Yes.
Right. If this was a computer simulation, would that apply to us then? Would we not have morals?
The thing is if we were in a computer simulation, like I said, we would still have to operate exactly the same way we do now. So, for instance, when you're playing a video game, are you in that game or are you external from that game?
External.
Okay, so you yourself are not held morally accountable, but your avatar within the game might be, depending on what type of game you're playing.
Right.
Yeah, but for instance, doesn't have any real-world consequences, though.
Well, no,
it doesn't morality don't exist because people exist.
And you can't externally punish an avatar because they have no.
You could delete them.
You could okay.
But you
can't. Well, and you could argue that the avatar is already imprisoned, so you can't really do that. You can.
Well, technically, the avatar exists within its own world. But what I'm saying is, though, so if you are the external person guiding the avatar, if the avatar gets punished, you yourself aren't really getting punished. You can walk away from the game at any point and go do anything else. Whereas if we were in a simulation, we would effectively be those avatars. So the same thing like an avatar being punished in a game. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of a game called Undertale, but like in Undertale, if you start killing NPCs in Undertale, the game will ruin you. It will revoke your ability to ever get a good ending again. It will corrupt your save data. It will do all kinds of things within the environment of the game. But externally, you can do whatever the hell you want. If you're actively if you were in a simulation, you would effectively be the avatar, not the player.
Does your avatar exist? Do you believe that your avatar exists at least?
I don't believe the avatar actually exists.
But it exists in some way.
There's a thing that I'm perceiving. It's a lot like color. Does color truly exist? Well, no, but you can perceive it, and it can be real. It can be real to you in some sense, but it doesn't mean it actually exists.
Yeah. See, there's no physicality to your avatar. I don't think the avatar actually exists. But if hang on. But if the propositional statement was. Does your, whatever you name your avatar, this is called Cirrus Avatar. Cirrus Avatar exist. If fictional truth statements can be allowed to have a propositional value and you accept fictionalism of that kind, I think that you could assign a truth value to it. I think you can say, this like, can Superman fly? Yes, he can fly in regards to fictional truth statements.
Yeah,
in regards there's no correspondence to reality, so you can't use correspondence theory in that, obviously. Because there's no
true
Superman.
And at that point, you would also get into the immersive aspect as well. You might not be convinced that a particular, say, an NPC, you might not be convinced that this NPC is real, but if the game itself is immersive enough, you might become attached enough to that NPC to where whether or not it's real doesn't necessarily matter. In your view right there, that NPC is real enough to cause emotion.
Oh, yeah, but that doesn't But that doesn't affect the truth value. I mean, emotions have no
No,
value,
it doesn't affect the truth
that.
value at all.
I mean, there's something called emotivism, but emotivism is only that truth values are basically representations of emotions. Like stealing is wrong, boo on stealing. That's emotivism.
Well, and even reading a character in a book can cause emotion. A fictitious character.
But if you guys were pea zombies, it'd still be emotional, right? I mean, if I had feelings for somebody and I was hurt by that, even if they were pea zombies or not, it still affects me, right?
Well, yeah, because you don't know that they don't have consciousness.
Would it matter if they didn't? I'm curious. I mean, if they had no consciousness,
if they were able to, what the heck? Oh, hang on, sorry.
I mean, if I was in love with somebody and they ended up being a pea zombie, even though I don't know how you would ever find out, would it diminish my feelings? How would that impact that?
It wouldn't. It wouldn't diminish your feelings at all, because the only person who could actually diminish your feelings would be you. It would be how. What's a good way to word this? It would be how much you're willing to vest in somebody who is that much different than you. Because if they're a pea zombie, they're not necessarily human. In this, like, they don't suffer from the human condition. Rather,
right?
I'd say they don't have the human condition. But if
would it matter? Okay, I agree with you, but would it matter? I mean, look, if they're going to have through all the same exact movements and exact sentences, and they would be exactly the same whether they're pea zombie or not.
And I don't think it would necessarily. And I don't think it would necessarily matter at that point if you.
It wouldn't, because you become to care for someone because they fill emotional needs for you. If they're able to do that despite having no consciousness, then it really wouldn't matter, I don't think. Especially if you wouldn't know that they didn't have consciousness in the first place.
I do have a moral responsibility to that, though. If they're a pea zombie and they have no conscience, is there a moral responsibility to them?
At that point, it really comes down to how you would define morals. Because if society at large doesn't think there is, then that depends on where you put the objective goalpost.
I don't think there's no society. I'm talking about individual. Look at, I mean, again,
individual.
Morality would not exist if it were not for humans.
Well,
moral facts cannot exist if humans don't exist.
To me, it would be, does consciousness determine whether someone can feel physical pain or not?
Well, they can emulate feeling physical pain. Again, they're exactly like any other person, but they're not an actual person.
But if they were only emulating feeling pain and they couldn't actually feel it, then I think that the responsibility is diminished. But if they actually could feel it, then it would be the same.
I agree with you, but it's a slippery slope, because I have seen
for sure.
people that think that like animals are automatrons,
right,
or they're just sentient beings. They have no consciousness.
Well,
they have no will.
And that's the problem, because I think we're finding more and more and more that animals are sentient.
We think so, but they don't. No matter how much facts you give them, they're always going to be like, no, they're not. God did not give them consciousness. God did not. God just made them like a plant, only to pretend to have this ability to sit and roll over and play dead. They don't think they're real entities.
Why would they say that God gave them the ability to appear that they had it if they don't? Like, that doesn't make sense.
The argument then would be that it's for our benefit.
Yeah, for our immersion into this reality that he created. You know, if he's the great immersion and caretaker of this universe that he's created, and if you have like a personal theistic personalism, where God created the universe separately for him and maintains it separately from him, then everything in that is just a fake creation. It's not a real thing. The only thing that would be real would be God and heaven.
Actually, you want to know the real reason God made the animals to seem as if they were sentient and had consciousness? It's because he didn't realize that Adam was going to have to fuck a female, and so he asked him to go around and see if he could find a mate with every other one first. And then he just left them there.
And when Adam found out he had to name all of them, he was like, screw this.
I know, right?
Adam's just like, I don't want to fuck a hippopotamus, and I don't want to fuck a squirrel.
Yeah, well, good luck fucking a giraffe.
Yeah. What are you? I mean, are you against giraffe love? I mean, giraffes need love.
Actually, I think all elephants should be able to love pine trees if they choose.
I agree. You know,
Absolutely.
and the pine tree has a
Absolutely.
right to say no. And just remember this: just because a pine tree gives consent, it doesn't mean it gives consent to get impregnated.
And
Sorry,
it doesn't mean that
sorry,
the pine
classical
tree
theist, you're an
has
idiot.
given consent to then birth a dog.
Did you guys hear that thing with
Yeah.
classical theist? He actually was making the argument that if a woman gives consent to have sex,
She's giving consent to have a baby.
No,
Well, to
that
get
is-
pregnant.
That is
She-
incorrect.
Get pregnant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was his
I
argument.
was there. I was there for that show.
He's
Right.
actually going to defend that on the
true.
non sequitur show.
That is.
I can't
who
wait
is
for
he
that.
talking? Who is he talking to on that particular show?
Well, Kyle, myself, and who else is going to be on that? I don't know. You?
Because I mean, like, I personally would not mind having that conversation with him.
I got no issue with that. I don't think Kyle would. I don't think we had planned on anybody else coming in. But I think it's fine. I mean, we're gonna run that by him for sure. But yeah, I mean, that is just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. And I've heard a lot of dumb things.
Yeah, and
Flat
I think
earthers.
it's like saying if you have to take everything to its, like, if you have consent to something and you have to take it to its logical extreme, which is what that sounds like, because the logical extreme of sex is impregnation. That's where it would logically go if there were no barriers put up. That would mean that if you told somebody, hey, I'm giving you permission to, say, punch my hand, like, just to do a strength test, and then they punch it repeatedly enough to break your wrist, and you have to go, why did you do that? Well, you gave consent to punching. That implies that I had consent to break your bones. No, it did not.
Yeah. Well, it's the same
Yeah.
thing. If a woman goes home with a man from the bar, and this because of the possibility of something, somebody had asked in the live chat, if they don't use conception, are they not giving consent or a possibility? Yeah,
No,
giving
it's
consent.
still not
Well, hang on. Yes, to giving consent is a possibility. When you engage in certain practices, you are taking on a responsibility and acknowledgement that there are possibilities. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you're giving consent for the action to actually happen, as far as willful. If I say,
Yes.
if a girl goes home with a guy from a bar, there is a possibility he could be a serial killer and kill her. She's not
doesn't
giving
mean that
consent
she
to
gave
him,
consent
saying,
to
"Hey,
kill
go
her.
ahead and take me home and kill me."
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
it-
In
it-
fact,
it's-
we have shown in previous cases that if somebody actually does say, "Take me home and kill me," we still don't allow it.
Yeah,
No, and
unless you're a
just
Canadian.
because we have previous things that are
Nah.
against that.
Canadians like, "Hey, you want to eat my flesh? Here you go." You know.
But there was that German guy. He got the other guy off of classifieds
Yeah, I saw
for
that.
people with cannibalism fetishes, and the other guy was like, this is my life's dream to be killed and consumed by someone.
I guess it's legal in some areas. I don't know.
I mean,
Well, no, the other guy got put in jail, even though they had on video that the victim guy said, "No, this is what I want." The problem was that the original way, like the way the quote victim, I think he tried to overdose on pills or something, and it didn't work, and he wasn't dying quick enough. The cannibal finished him, and that's where the law said, no, it wasn't suicide then because you finished him, so now you're going to jail. Even though the guy said, "I want to die and be eaten by this man."
And that guy,
Oh.
both of them did exist, right? You believe both of them existed, right?
Yes,
Okay.
both of them existed. Yes, I do believe so.
I really wish one of these guys from Twitter would come in here. I honestly do. I put it out there, and I was like, I'm having this hangout, but not one has just said, "Yeah, no, let me come and explain why I don't believe that you exist."
Come on,
'Cause I really do.
non-believers
What the heck?
come on, Steve, non-believers, get over here and plead your case.
Test our epistemology. We believe in Macraeanism.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's not just me.
Long live
It's not just they don't
Steve.
believe me. They don't believe you guys exist either. So you guys are in the same boat as me.
Yeah,
They don't
okay,
believe
yeah.
They don't believe anything. Actually, that's just the weird part. They don't even say that. I have no beliefs. Really? How do you go
see,
through life with
if-
no
if-
beliefs?
if you
I don't even know how that makes sense. That's like
And
saying
see, if
you
you
don't
don't-
believe 1 + 1 = 2. Do you know how dumb that sounds when somebody says, "I don't believe 1 + 1 = 2"? Really?
And that's like
Okay.
saying, "Is my truth your truth? 1 + 1 is 2 to you, but what if it's 3 to me?" That's not how it works.
That's not, yeah,
No.
that's not how it works at all.
Exactly. And like when somebody says, yeah, it's true for me, that doesn't mean it's true for you. That means you believe it. That has nothing to do with whether or not it's true. It can't be. Truth has nothing to do with your subjective preference.
The belief in a proposition being true has no relevancy if the proposition is true or not, especially if it's related to reality, right? I mean, that's generally what people do relate it to. But if 1 + 1 = 2, I think is an objective fact. It doesn't matter whether you believe it's true or not. It's a fact.
Plug it into any equation and see if it comes out the way that they think, and if it never comes out the way that they think, then all of a sudden you have an objectively verifiable bit of data that shows that they are wrong. Then again, we still have flat earthers, even though that holds true.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think flat earthers, what they do is first of all, they don't accept objective facts, I don't think, and they really. I think every flat earther out there that actually believes the earth is flat, I think it stems from a psychological issue. And I think there's something deeper ingrained in their psyche where they want to feel superior in such a way that they want to believe something that nobody else, or that most people don't.
That's right.
Right? They want to be like, you know what, I'm not that smart, but you know what, I'm smarter than all you people with PhDs and smarter than college people.
It's the same kind of mentality of anti-vaxxers and conspiracy nuts, but I'm so special, and even the worst part with atheists and quote free thinkers that go woo woo and whatnot is that need. I can't be special because I'm a Christian anymore, so I have to be special some other way, right? But it's just, it all boils down to is that I see something that no one else can see, and so I'm extra special because of it. And now I can look down on all these peons who believe the earth is round. It's just...
Yeah, no, yeah. I get that mindset. Look, I'm not going to front and say I was any different than anybody else when I was a teenager. Look, I did some occult stuff when I was a teenager, and I like, oh, you know what? I know something that the rest of the world doesn't know, because I was reading all those books from the 70s and stuff. And they were, prevalent during the time, and so I was buying into a lot of stuff that I don't buy into now. But it did make you feel like, oh, hey, I'm wearing a pentacle, or I have, something, a wording of something. And so as a thief, as a theist, even in the LDS Church, you have a sensation like, hey, I know something about theology and God that most people don't know. I have some truth that most people don't know. But then you realize it's not really the case, and they think the exact same thing about their religions or beliefs.
Yeah, and you
Brian
see
says he's muted, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm getting him right now.
A lot of people that go for the old, I believe in Jesus, but not religion. It's the same kind of thing too. All those people that follow those silly religions have it wrong, and I just follow Jesus and yada yada yada. That kind of mentality.
Yeah, I understand the reasoning behind somebody saying, well, I believe in Jesus, but I don't follow religion. But at the same time, I think it's kind of a cop-out.
It is. Oh, it's totally
because Christianity is a religion. No matter how much they want to get away from that, it is absolutely a religion.
It's a way to avoid all the usual criticisms of said religion.
Right.
Yeah.
Just, oh, well, I don't believe any of that stuff. I just follow Jesus.
But isn't that kind of what you're doing when you go back into the topic a little bit? When you don't want to talk about beliefs, when you hear a theist talk about belief, and you're like, I don't want to talk about beliefs because then it goes down to this rabbit hole, and I'm giving the empowerment. Aren't you kind of doing the same thing? Because you know that when you talk about these subjects, you are dealing with beliefs, and there's nothing wrong with that, as you know now. So maybe you're kind of doing what the Christians doing when they're saying, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't follow any religion. When you're saying, hey, I'm having these discussions about theology, but I don't want to talk about belief.
I'm not avoiding the concept. I'm just rewording it to avoid that particular word. I will restate it in a way that means the same thing.
At that point, though, isn't it? I don't want to say this is exactly what it is, but it's kind of what it is. It's letting them appropriate the term and poison.
I was going to say that too. I think it gives them empowerment. I think that if you allow them to take over a certain word, especially like belief, you are empowering them. I think you're actually having a counter effect of what you're going for. And this is my own personal recommendation. Do whatever the fuck you want, people. I mean, who the fuck am I? But I've been saying this for a while. I think that by allowing certain words to be taken over by a group, you are giving them more empowerment, and it's counterproductive to your cause. So if you're allowing theists to take over the word belief, it is counterproductive, because I think you can make a much stronger argument by explaining, don't just believe, I know it to be true. Let me explain to you why I know it to be true. And then, of course,
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But when you get to someone like that instance with Aaron and Slick, where Slick is just ignoring every rational argument to the contrary, they're forcibly appropriating it at that point. So do you then make a choice to hope that someone, because to me, a debate like that's never about changing your opponent's mind. It's always about who's watching or reading. So do you risk letting it get so muddied that people aren't going to see the validity of your point? Or do you and fight the word? Or do you choose your battle, let the one word go, and find another way to get the point across? I think it's not always the right answer.
I think it's just situational, and I think there are outliers, absolutely. Especially when you're dealing with Aaron and Slick. You're dealing with two people that are vastly different. And I
deal with a lot of Slicks when it comes
but let's be realistic. And as much as I love Aaron, and if Aaron watches this, I love you, dude. I have the utmost respect. But Aaron's big thing is not epistemology. He's tried to read epistemology.
Yeah,
he's getting there, and I think he really does want to learn it. And I know Aaron to be a very honest and have integrity, and I believe he wants to have his beliefs correct, and he wants to be better at these things. I totally believe that. But when he's talking to Slick, let's be realistic here. He's not going to know probably how to avoid Slick's pitfalls, because Slick is a professional huckster when it comes to that.
Yeah,
he's very good at it. So imagine in that particular case, okay, fine, forsake the word believe just to move past it. But for the most part, I wouldn't.
I was just gonna say, I've come across people that even aren't as wily as Slick would be, but they just won't give up the point no matter what you say. And there comes a point where you kind of have to go, is it worth beating this dead horse to get the point across, or do you try and do it somewhere other way?
I get that.
I think that at that point, the best course of action is to ask them what their working definition of the word is. And if you can't come to an agreement on the word, then for the sake of the conversation, the word is thrown out.
I can agree with that,
and then you find another word that will work. And you just suspend whatever definitions that you would normally ascribe to for the sake of the conversation, and go with the working definitions for the conversation. And whichever ones are tainted that much, like for Slick's case, if you said belief and he was like, that's faith, you're just like, cool. For Slick, I'll throw it out. But if I'm talking to, say, you, Steve, I'll gladly use the term, because you and I know that it doesn't mean the same thing Steve means it says it means.
I think there's always going to be exceptions. None of these things are hard, fast, dried, rules. These are not objective rules in the framework of reality or the fabric of reality. But Brian, my friend.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, guys.
But he hasn't said anything yet.
I agree with the whole, I love Aaron Ra too, and I think even I get into that pitfall of, I know epistemology a bit, but I know Steve can run me over on that, and so can Matt Slick. But that doesn't make Matt Slick's arguments valid. It just means he'll come off sounding more valid, which I think is the problem when you leave your area of expertise.
It doesn't make
Matt
them
does
valid.
do that. Matt really puts that R of, I am really well versed in this stuff. He has all his books, but if you guys ever watched his whole tag argument,
oh God,
dude, it's bad.
Malpass took him down on that. Alex Malpass destroyed him on that, and Slick has not really. I mean, Malpass walked him through each of the problems with it, and I haven't heard Slick respond properly.
Let me tell you what's going on there if you want to know.
Sure.
Alex Malpass destroyed him. Theoretical bullshit. Scott Clifton destroyed him. I've even been on the Council of Google Plus, and I've explained it to him. Skylar had a video on that. The what's going on now is that Matt just recently on his Facebook page had put that not only did Alex not destroy his tag argument, but somehow actually demonstrated God exists.
What?
How? Go look. It was on his Facebook. And so wait a minute. This is all public now, so I'm not like revealing anything.
Well, good news. That's the 17th way we know God exists now. That's the 17th.
It was 5 ways, 16 ways, and now 17. Okay.
And the 18th way we know God exists is we can't prove that Steve exists.
Yeah. So Brian, do you believe Steve exists?
I talk to a lot of street preachers, and I hate all that. I'm just going to ask Suresh real quick. Is that Bleach on your shelf right there?
The Bleach?
Bleach, the manga. Is that manga?
No, that is Ranma 1/2.
Oh, okay, that one. Oh, okay. I saw what I thought was manga, so I was like, yeah, Ranma 1/2. I'll have to check that out. No, but I have street preachers who are just like, you just get a lot of them like to go to the whole theory of knowledge and everything. How do you know you exist and everything? I consider it like Matt Dillahunty does, like you're knocking the chess pieces off the table. It makes a whole different discussion.
Or they do the whole thing where like, here's a circle. This is all the things we can know.
God,
here's
stupid.
a little circle. These are all the things we don't know.
But anyways, real quick. So Alex, I want Alex to have another discussion with Matt. I already asked Matt, and Matt says he will, but we can't make it happen yet. But the problem is that Alex wants Matt to have a better argument, right? Because it's obviously the first argument's been destroyed. Matt doesn't get it, and for him to say that Alex didn't destroy it and yet demonstrated God, we're all thinking, well, maybe he's reformulated his argument somehow or something. Nope, still the same bad argument, still the same false substitution in the first premise that he's sneaking in, false dichotomy that he's sneaking in. But yeah, I would love to have that discussion. If we can get Alex and Matt Slick to talk about tag on the Non Sequitur show, I'd be thrilled to death. You guys would like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be awesome.
Awesome.
Oh God, that would be watched.
I think though that Dillahunty has it right though when he says that the problem with apologetics, especially with like Matt Slick's tag argument, is anytime it gets knocked down, there's one of two things that happen. They either close their ears and say no, la 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 la, you didn't knock it down, or they go and polish it up. It's shinier now.
Yeah,
I think Matt tried to do both. Originally, I think Matt tried to do both, but then it was just the first one. He did not want to recognize that the argument was just flawed from the get-go. And when he would ask Alex, well, how do I fix this? How do I shore it up? And he's just like, well, you can't. I mean, if there was a way to do that, then I'd probably believe like you believe. And it's a dead argument. And Matt just doesn't understand why it's a dead argument. No matter how many people explain it to him, he doesn't get the tag argument being
half the problem there is he thinks he's smarter than everybody else.
Well, like I said, I mean, I'm sure he's erudite. Like I said, I have no formal training in this topics either. But I trust Alex, who is very formally trained, and I can understand him, and I can understand the reasoning why Matt's wrong. So I know Matt doesn't have a freaking clue because it's not that complicated why his tag argument is wrong. But let me clarify: not all transcendental arguments are bad. There's nothing wrong with transcendental arguments. People the other day, somebody had mentioned something about these like ontological, cosmological, transcendental arguments. People can have a transcendental argument. The problem is his argument is a transcendental argument for God, and it's flawed.
Yeah.
That's the difference. If you have a transcendental argument for something else, you can make a pretty decent argument for transcendental stuff, but not when you try to conclude God and based upon false premises. Does anybody not know his tag argument?
I haven't listened to it in a while, but I remember it if I heard it.
Probably 3 months since I heard his debate with Dillahunty, and maybe 2 months since I heard his thing with Aaron. I'd have to look it up to get it again.
It basically goes, and I'm summarizing. I haven't looked at it for a while either, but if I remember correctly, it goes, God either accounts for logic, or not God accounts for logic. And there's so many problems with that because you can't even have God or not God. That's no such thing as not noun, okay? You don't have not chair, and God's a noun. So saying God or not God, bad form. But even Alex says, yeah, whatever. We'll roll with that.
Yeah, because really what he means is God exists or God doesn't exist, not God or not God.
And even then, I kind of go, well, and this is going to be extreme, but not all logic used bivalence, has a principle of bivalence, which is true or false. I mean, there are multi-variable or multi-value types of logic where you can have true, false, and other, or true, false, and unknown, or something.
Yes.
So it depends on what system of logic you use. So in this particular case, so if you're going to use, though, the bivalence, principle of bivalence, so is God exist or God does not exist ontologically, okay, fair enough. That is a dichotomy. But when you throw in is either accounting for the God logic or not God is, that you have a false dichotomy because neither one could account for it or both of them could account for it. You have other options, right? You don't have to. God can account for logic. Well, maybe not God could too. Maybe some other God could as well. He just discounts that possibility.
Aliens.
Yeah.
Aliens.
But that's unfathomable. You can't have that. It's either the Christian God does or no other God can.
Well, you know what pisses me off is when you're discussing with somebody like that, and they go, "Oh, I don't necessarily mean the Christian God. Oh, no, I don't mean that." And then you go through all the whole crap with them, and then you get, you're debunking them. They just won't admit it. You get to the end. Oh, well, I meant the Christian God. It's like, I told you that like 3 hours ago, and you wouldn't admit it.
Only aliens froze the stream.
Somebody just asked me where I got my hair done. It was on the weekend. I went to a place called Salon Centric. They gave me a conditioning treatment and straightened it. Matter of fact, it was so straight. It was like awesome straight. And I just bought a flat iron because I watched how she did it, and so I used it a little bit today, but she had it really, really perfectly straight, and it felt awesome. So it's still relatively straight, but yeah. So I decided to have it professionally done because I got tired of the knots, and they cut off the split ends, and yeah, she did a wonderful job.
You didn't feel like looking like the philosophical homeless man?
Yeah, well, I went like this. I said, look, I want to look, I didn't say philosophical, but I said what I did say was I don't want to look like Bozo the Clown. That's what I out to here. I did say that. She's like, so you just want it straightened, and she's like, I got you covered. Okay.
So the rainbow afro was out then.
Yeah, the rainbow afro. That's what it actually looks like.
You don't want to have Steve in the back just going, "Hey kids."
Yeah.
I gotta get
So
one of these days. So.
What are you doing? We can't hear you hardly anymore.
What?
Talk into the microphone, dude.
Oh, sorry. Does this look better without glasses? I think it does.
We only see your avatar, remember? Your camera's
watching the outside
in the other
view?
room.
We can see him on the stream,
Yeah,
but Steve, it looks like you're...
Oh, okay. Well, I can't see
Steve,
him.
have you fixed the stream itself? Because it shows just a still of Heretic Lady, and it's not moving.
Oh, it really? Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, lovely. I hope it's a good angle.
The chat has been telling you about it, and
I don't pay attention to the chat. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't see him say that. Okay.
Meanwhile, looks in the chat. Steve McRae has typed to the chat, but doesn't pay attention.
Yeah.
Are you sure that that's the real Steve? Does that one really exist?
I don't exist, remember?
Yeah, I know.
Why is it doing that?
Well, see, the Steve I'm looking at is obviously, it could be real, but the Steve in the chat is obviously a D-zombie.
It's fixed now.
Okay, good. I'm like, I don't know if I want people just staring at me the whole time.
It's a little disconcerting, right?
There you go.
Well, you know what's you got to admit, though, when you're online and you're on air, you are putting yourself out there. Now, all of us have been doing this for a very long time, so we're used to it by now. But
dude, I'm coming up on 4 years.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm coming up on 4 months.
Yeah, well, even still, I think after a month you kind of get used to it. But
yeah, you do.
Over a period of years, it definitely you don't care any longer. But I do know people, a lot of people. I get messages all day long, and a common one that I get is people that want to come join, and they feel they either don't have an online presence, they don't know how to communicate well, they don't know how to enunciate well, or whatever their angst is. Then I just tell them, look, the only way you're going to get better, or only way you're going to be able to jump in, is just to do it. Nobody's going to give a shit if you're not articulate right off the bat.
When I first started
I still get
hopping
shit
on
from
streams,
me, and I'm not articulate. So
when I first started hopping on streams with you, Steve, I was at what, like 20 subscribers?
Yeah.
Some like tiny and insignificant amount.
Well, I mean, a lot of people that first came on the channel, Apologia had 100 when I first brought him on the channel. Now he has, I don't know, like 20,000.
17,000?
Yeah, it must be nice.
See, Anti-Ordinary, she only had like 20. Now she's breaking 1,000. I had Rachel Oates on. She had probably, I don't know, a couple hundred. Now she's breaking 20, 30, 40,000. I don't know. And it's
So
funny.
what the hell's wrong with me then?
Well, hang on. It's funny because every one of these people that I've said, you're going to get a lot of subs. I have called every one of them. Go back and check. I said, Paul Gia, you're going to be a fucking superstar. AO, you're going to be a star. Rachel Oates, you're going to be a mega superstar. I've never said that to Heretic, so maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Well, see, Steve, what you told me specifically was you have to have people who watch you first, and you don't.
I did tell you that. Yeah, it helps.
No, I have like 10 times the list, like, because we simulcast in podcast form, so we had like 10 times the listeners. But yeah, I'm like,
you're an outlier. I don't know what it is with you. I cannot figure out why we can't get you subs. Kidnu5 says I'm nearly at 300. Thank you.
Now,
but hang on, real quick. Kidnu,
when I went,
one
sorry,
Kidnu5. I don't know how you only have 300. I love your channel. You guys are. I don't know who's doing your podcast or your videos. You and somebody else. I don't know who the voices are. I don't know if it's like one person, two people, four people. But I gotta tell you, they're freaking brilliant. And you've got to do a collab with me of some kind. You've got to come on, and we've got to talk about your shit because I love your channel. I think it's hilarious. You guys are severely undersubbed. So. Okay, so it's just him, and he does. So you do like multiple voices or something. But yeah, if you guys don't know Kidnu5, go watch his stuff. It's hilarious. He just rips on people, in a good way, not in like a geek room way, but just a intellectual type way. It's good. But anyways, go ahead, Heretic. Sorry.
Oh, no. Oh, I think I lost my train of thought. What I was gonna say. So.
But yeah, first you got to believe that I exist to have a conversation.
Well, I do. Mm.
Yeah. Cult of
Yes.
There is something.
Although I did get recognized by somebody this weekend from being on your channel. So
yeah,
that's weird. What it was. That's what I was gonna say. I got 3 subscribers from the Incel show. So there. Slowly.
Yeah, I can't believe somebody recognized you in Canada from the
I know,
and
Western Canada. So I was out in Calgary on the weekend, and that Calgary and Alberta in general is where our largest concentration of religious right-wingers is. And so we were having, of course, an atheist convention out there. And I was talking to a lady. We were talking about the challenge of being called Islamophobic if you criticize Islam and how to get around that and that sort of thing. And we were discussing that, and she's like, "Oh, I know you from Steve McRae's channel." I'm like, "What?"
People know me in Canada. That's kind of awesome.
I know, eh?
I was going to say that there's actually a guy in the Great Debate community right now in G+, and he just wasn't understanding that if you want to have a conversation with me, you need to believe that I exist, because he just was like, I don't believe that you exist. I don't believe you exist. I'm like, oh, fine. So I muted him. And he still doesn't understand. He still doesn't understand. I'm like, well, I don't exist, but it doesn't matter whether I mute you or not, because I don't exist to you. No, you exist to me, but I don't believe you exist. Then you're irrational, and I don't want to have a conversation with you.
He's talking to himself one way or another.
Either way, either he thinks that I don't exist, or he's irrational. And either way, I'm like trying to explain to him, I don't want to deal with people that want to hold on to irrational beliefs. I think most people, whether you believe something to be true or believe it to be false, or whatever your convictions are, where you stand on this landscape of beliefs, I think most people want their beliefs to be true, and I think most people do not want to have irrationality. Anybody who says, I don't believe that you exist, but has a conversation with you, you're irrational. You just, period, you're irrational. So why do I want to have a conversation with somebody who's irrational, who doesn't want to learn why they're irrational? I don't want to waste my time with that. I just don't.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to name any names.
Because I've done it enough times. I've learned I have not myself, maybe this is a limitation to myself, I have not been able to convince anybody why they're being irrational, why what they're saying makes no sense epistemologically speaking. I lack the ability to do so maybe. I don't have the skill set to take it from a pedagogical approach and explain to them. But you know what? Maybe Alex can. Maybe Ozzy can. Maybe somebody else with experience can explain to these people, you're being irrational by saying you don't believe that I exist. And then
well, it
have a
boils
conversation.
down to the fact that you can't know something without believing it.
Yeah, well, that's just one aspect of it. I mean, while that's true, I think it's even more. I think it's even more important to say that you are having what I think would be almost like a performance contradiction in some ways. You're having a belief act. You're acting as if I exist, right? You're acting as if you hold a belief that I exist, but at the same time saying I don't believe that you exist.
Ooh, that's a good point because your actions are actually stating that you do believe that they do believe that you exist. It's just like a theist I was arguing with last week who thought he was being really smart by, like, he says, oh, I'm a Christian, but I have no proof that there's a God, and I actually have no justification for my belief, so don't ask me. But then he said that the realization that people don't believe there's a hell upsets him because he doesn't want people to go to hell. I'm like, so you believe there's a hell and all? I never said that. I'm like, well, then why would you be up all night worrying about it if you didn't believe it was real? Well, I never said I believed it was real. I'm like, you don't have to. Your actions said it for you.
Yep, that's it's the same thing. Somebody mentioned about presuppositionalism. This is not presuppositionalism either. This is the people that don't believe that I exist. Every one of them has been an atheist. Every one of them so far has been an atheist. There's not been one theist.
And like I said, I think that's because they're avoiding the terminology because of it was said poisoning the well.
But it's at the expense of being irrational. And
it's not a good reason to do that.
You cannot take this. Okay, an atheist cannot take this epistemic high ground and want to say, look, I'm an atheist because I want to make sure my beliefs are true, and therefore, God does not exist, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. But at the same time, then have an irrational position and not want to fix it. That's the problem. And they do have an irrational position on that. Michael. Welcome, my friend.
Hey, what's up, dude?
So, by the way, Michael and I was talking about this the other day. Matter of fact, this was the very thing that we were just discussing when I was out and about. And maybe Michael can kind of explain it a little bit. But Michael, you want to talk about when somebody does have a belief act that they're acting as if they believe that you exist, but at the same time they don't hold a belief that you exist. That to me is irrational. Would you agree?
I'd agree. So I think I said yesterday, Ozzy holds this sort of position as well, right? Somebody can think that there's good reasons to be skeptical, right, about the existence of other minds. Somebody can hold that position. But to say that one knows that other minds don't exist, or even to believe it, but then go about their life and have their belief acts be in accord with a belief that's contradictory, that is, belief in other minds, is an irrational position. It's just untenable. They have to give up one or the other. And I challenge anybody who holds to a solipsistic position to act rationally and go about their life such that other minds don't exist. And until I see that actually happen, it's irrational.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. But the problem that we're having is that these people are not solipsists. These people believe other minds exist. They believe, let me rephrase that. They don't believe other minds exist. They know other minds exist, which is a problem because obviously you can't have one without the other. So these people are not going around saying, hey, I think I'm the only mind that is in existence. They're literally saying they're fine with having a knowledge that I exist, but then saying they don't hold a belief that I exist. And when you try to explain to them theories of knowledge, they don't understand it, and they don't think that you need a theory of knowledge to have knowledge. And this, to me, is as bad as people trying to do science that don't want to actually do science, right? Because they're talking about philosophical terms, and obviously knowledge, beliefs, and epistemology are philosophical in nature. So they wanted to say, I have knowledge, which is a propositional attitude, actually. If I know P, it's a propositional attitude on the proposition. But then they say, oh, I don't want to talk about propositions, or I don't want to talk about philosophy. Then I have a problem with that, because now you're saying to me, you're willing to have a conversation with me, but you don't believe that I exist. And I take that as an irrational position.
I do too. And I think that I mentioned this yesterday, but I take that as just excusing oneself from the conversation altogether, right? If somebody says that they know that I don't, or they know I exist or believe it, or they hold some sort of contradictory view like that, I just don't go any further with them. I mean, they might be rational on other positions, but in this case, they're wholly irrational and they've excused themselves from that conversation.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. But you know what? They just think you're a dick when you tell them I'm excusing myself from the conversation. Then if you don't believe that I exist, like I did with that guy from G+, I muted him. I was like, I'm quote unquote, I'm excusing myself from our conversation because if you don't believe that I exist, then why am I having conversation with you? I have no reason to. Yep. And they're just like, well, you're just being a dick, or I thought you were better at argumentation, Steve. And I'm like, you are so not understanding this. This is another reason why I don't want to talk to you.
Well, this idea, right, the existence of other mind falls into this category of proper basicality, like we talked about yesterday. I mean, what do they want you to do? Provide an inference that doesn't beg the question? I mean, because it can't be defended. Yeah, I mean, it can't be defended except on pain of circularity, right? So if they're looking for an argument, you just say, look, this is an unstated assumption of mine. I don't come to this conclusion based on inferences. It's something that I hold and without justification. And nonetheless, I seem rational for believing.
Oh, you're going to love this. It gets worse. There are a subgroup of these people. This is true. There's a subgroup of the people that don't believe that I exist that also don't believe assumptions are valid. You should never have assumptions. You should never ever have assumptions. I'm like, do you not understand? You've just eliminated all of science by saying that. You cannot have science without assumptions, people.
You assume something and test.
How could you even function through the day if you don't make assumptions?
I have no idea. I've had people try to tell me that they don't make any assumptions. They just don't. What?
You're assuming that the floor where you're about to put your feet out of bed is solid enough for you to stand on when you get up, right? You don't test that every damn time.
They'll say, no, well, I mean, I have past experience that justifies that. Therefore, I don't have to assume that it will.
It's an assumption. It's an assumption that it hasn't changed since the last time you collected evidence on it.
The uniformity of nature. Yeah. They are assuming a uniformity of nature, and they don't. But again, it's another like a performance contradiction. Their belief is that they're assuming a uniformity of nature, but then saying, "I don't make assumptions."
This is exactly what the critics of Pyrrho found so frustrating about his global skepticism, right? They used to remark that it was really frustrating to argue in the schools of philosophies with radical or global skeptics. Yes. But then these guys would go out and then hang out under, in the shade of trees, as if that wasn't also an assumption in and of itself. Right?
Don't mention any names, please. But you and I both know a pyrrhicist, right? We both know one. Right?
Yeah.
Don't mention names. Okay, a pyrrhist. Yeah. So what that is a global skeptic. That is the epitome of skepticism. And it's weird to me because actually, no, I kind of know two actually, but to have that kind of way of life that you have to be skeptical of everything, to me is not sustainable. It's not tenable. And I don't even take the skeptic label. And the reason I don't take the skeptic label any longer is because I think skeptic, the word more is towards skepticism, and skepticism has a lot of different things, philosophical, academic, and I think it just adds a lot of baggage. Am I skeptical? Yes. Right? I mean, I don't take things at face value. I think most people are skeptical, though, unless you're very, very naive. Then I think generally people want to be at least have some kind of skepticism of that nature.
But you don't hold to an epistemic theory of justification that it could be defined as skeptical, right? Like you have a theory of justification outside of skepticism.
Yeah,
that's right. And the reason why that is because you understand there is such a thing as knowledge, and that it is obtainable. And that's where the Pyrrhonist or the epistemic skeptic, we're not talking about skeptics like YouTube skepticism, but we're talking about epistemic skepticism. That's where they want to go. They want to be
the hardest
radical skeptics.
Yeah, the hardest skeptics, the ones that would be like a academic. I think called academic skeptics, but it could be philosophical skeptics. They hold the position that knowledge doesn't even exist. That you can't even have knowledge.
Well, I sympathize with that because, and the reason why I sympathize with it is for the same reason in your analogy that you emailed me, right? Mm-hmm. We will only ever have access to the map. We will never have access to the territory.
And I understand that, right? I get that position. I know it sounds weird when somebody says, "Look, I'm gonna call it philosophical skepticism," but I don't remember if it's philosophical or academic or epistemic.
It's epistemic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll call it epistemic skepticism. So an epistemic skeptic would say knowledge is something that nobody could ever have, and there's actually reasons for them saying that. It doesn't sound, it's not as weird as it sounds, because again, since we only have our map to the territory, we only have our perceptions to the territory. Whatever that territory is, we don't have access to it. So therefore, everything we are based everything upon is our own perceptions, and therefore we can never know what there is to know about that territory. That's why you have to have some kind of epistemic framework. That's why you need some kind of theory of justification. I tend to go to foundationalism, where I have properly basic beliefs, and you just build upon that. They're not inferentially justifiable. I get that. There's always going to be problems with everyone you pick. That one just happens to be arbitrariness. But I think, Michael, if I remember, you're found herentist.
Yeah, in a sense, but if you had to pin me down to just one, I'd say coherentist.
Okay. Well, I don't really see how found herentism really mingles. I think the only reason you have found herentism is because on foundationalism, you have the problem of being arbitrary, and I think on the problem of coherentism, you have circularity. Is that
well, it's infinite regress.
Infinite regress. I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah. So
I'm thinking of the Munchausen trilemma. Which one is it? Okay, infinite regress. And so the found herentist tries to get away from those two problems, I think.
But see, this is why I think, although Plantinga is wrong about his idea of properly basic beliefs, I think his idea of proper basicality is clever and needed, right? I think there are just these things that we hold to as unstated assumptions about the world, right? So while I think Plantinga is wrong, I think he's clever and added a much needed category to beliefs to make something like foundationalism or coherentism actually really stick. And yeah, coherentism still has the infinite regress problem. And yeah, foundationalism has this idea of arbitrariness, but if you add proper basicality to both of those, classical foundationalism is rejected by Plantinga for that reason. It doesn't accept proper basicality. But as soon as you accept proper basicality as a category, give it inclusion and exclusion criteria, all the problems with foundationalism essentially disappear, as far as I know.
Do you think I would be more? We should invent something then. Reformed foundationalism with proper basicality, because I accept those 6 properly basic belief criteria. I think that they make sense, and I think that you're absolutely right. I think that if you're going to be a foundationalist, then you should be able to hold those things as properly basic beliefs under those conditions, because some of them, for example, seem self-evident, right? And that's why I don't even mind calling them some of these things brute facts. The universalist approach, that the universe, right, exists. Right, that has to be ubiquitous among everybody. So that is something that everybody has to assume to be the case in order to function or to build an epistemic framework.
That's right. Despite the problems with induction and everything else, despite these problems, and that's why they're unstated assumptions, right? The epistemic foundationalist who accepts a criteria for proper basicality is going to go, look, I understand that there are problems, such as the problem of induction and stuff like that. But I'm happy to be a pragmatist about those and just say that the things on which my epistemic theory of justification is founded are not arbitrary in virtue of their being universally held.
Yeah, I mean, does everybody else kind of know what we're talking about when it comes to the properly basic, basic proper?
Once you get the words out, we'll be able to figure it out.
Properly basic beliefs. And the what are called the what is it, the what I'm sorry, what press my memory.
Well, there's proper basicality, and then there's theories of justification.
No, the basic I'm still having a mind fart here for some reason. No, I was looking at something and then I got distracted. Proper basicality. Sorry. Let me close that out. You know what? I'm like when I'm focused on two different things, I lose my train of thought. But the properly basic belief or basic yeah, see, I'm doing it again.
Proper basicality.
Basicality. So, anyways, do you want to kind of remind people what those 6 things are?
Well, there's actually 5.
Was it 5 or 6?
It's 5, but this isn't a criteria that's been had concrete for.
No,
right?
I think they just make sense. I mean, they're not written. They're not like written in stone. You're not going to find them in any book, I don't think. But I just think they make sense.
Right, and it's really Ozzy that came up with these. So I want to give Ozymandias Ramses a second, like full credit for this, because I didn't come up with this. I just transcribed what he had said, word for word, and I suppose I could read them out loud, but I'll just summarize what they are real quick.
Yes, just do a summary on the basic propercality.
Yeah. So the first criteria is that they're all unstated assumptions. No one can become or made aware of them. You're never taught to trust your senses, right? To rely on your memory, look for causes, think of yourself as a self, or to apply induction, right? These are just assumptions that you make, right? So that's the first one. The second one is that they're all universally held, which gets us out of the problem of arbitrariness. Number 3 is that they're an ingredient to rationality and reasonableness to such a degree that their denial manifests itself as obvious irrationality and even madness. Number 4 is they cannot be defended except on pain of circularity, which is why they're non-inferential. They can't be justified because it would just be begging the question, essentially is what number 4 is.
Right.
And then number 5 is they're irrevisable, not to be confused with indubitable or inerrant. We have no grounds for rejecting them because we'd have to employ them in the very act of reasoning about why rejecting them. So, in other words, they constitute the very basis by which we can reason and arrive at the rest of our beliefs. That's Ozzy's criteria, and those are the ones that I hold to because I think these are the most articulate. Now,
I do too.
Somebody like the realistic nihilist actually disagrees with, I think, at least 3 of these, but I don't know if he's posited any alternative criteria or not. So provisionally, I hold these to be the case.
I mean,
for
I can see
basicality.
the discussion on some of them, but I think that the proper basicality for some of those ones are just irrefutable. I mean, for example, like one on pains of circularity. If you have a foundational approach and you have these properly basic beliefs, if you were able to justify them, it would be completely circular, right? Because you're taking them. And I know you hate this word, but you are taking them as an axiomatic starting point. They are axioms.
That's right.
So
the only reason why I'm like trying to get atheists more to use the term proper basicality or properly basic beliefs instead of axioms is because for some strange reason, and Steve, you probably have a better perspective on this than I do. But in the atheist community, axioms, the word axiom has sort of become a meme, which has taken on momentum all of its own, right? Like people just can say something's axiomatic, and it's almost just not questioned.
I only see that in like maybe like a Krillism type stuff. I don't think that it has that effect as much as you think it does. Now I know what you're referring to. There are some groups of people that are atheists. I think the word axiom means arbitrary. Or it means,
that's right.
It means,
That's right.
It basically that if I say, well, that's just an axiom, I'm just pulling something out of my ass that's not justifiable. Right. That's random. That's not that arbitrary, and that's not what an axiom is at all, right? So I know what you're saying, but I think those people just have a problem with the understanding of axiomatic assumption. Vice. Should we stay away from those terms? No, because axioms are very important, especially mathematics. I mean, we wouldn't have mathematics without axioms. But axioms have reasons, right? Even ZFC, all those axioms, what are they, 12 or 13 different things in ZFC theory? Those axioms are quite critical, right? And they're axioms. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a problem with the word axiom, but it goes back to the same thing with belief. Do we give up these words to certain people because they don't understand them properly? I mean, should we do that? I don't think so. I'm fine with the word axiom.
No, but I think I want people to be less afraid of using words like faith and belief and design,
I get
right?
that too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's such a thing, and Ozzy's talked about this, like teleonomic design. Why should we as atheists just resign that to theists, allow them to own
I said
that
the same
word?
thing. Look at
You know?
people look at me when I'm crazy when I say, look at the hand is designed, and they say, what are you, Stephen? Are you promoting intelligent design now? No. But I'm okay with saying the hand is teleonomically designed. It's designed to grip. I have an opposable thumb. I can grip this. It is designed teleonomically by nature to do that. I'm okay with
That's
that.
right.
But they think for some reason, if you invoke terminology like that, you're automatically on the same playing field as the theist or the intelligent design advocate. No, you're not.
Maybe.
Not at all. Matter of fact, one of the greatest things, this is weird because people love evolution, and they talk about Darwin a lot. But I never see people talk about this. One of the greatest things Darwin gave to science was teleonomical explanations for things.
Yeah.
Seriously, that is one of the greatest things he has given is that you don't need teleological explanations. You can give it a teleonomic explanation, and people just kind of glaze over that. They kind of go, "Oh well."
Maybe we need to start a campaign where we not only get back to the definitions of these words and demonstrate, because I think there are probably newer atheists out there that maybe don't even realize that you can properly use these words because they've been so demonized.
I agree.
And so like get like some sort of educational campaign. And I think if we put the spin on it that we're giving our power away to the theists by allowing them to control the use of these words, that perhaps we can encourage people to stop doing that.
I think it's a brilliant idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
because look at, and by the way, Iron wouldn't be probably leading that charge, but I think you're right. There's a lot of new people out there that are either atheists, agnostics, skeptics, non-believers, free thinkers, whatever the hell you want to label yourself. And the most of their information they're getting is strictly from what we would call the new atheists, the four people in the new atheists, or they would be getting it from atheist channels. I understand that, right? But I think they are depriving themselves from better argumentation by not allowing themselves to understand certain types of words, and belief obviously is one of them. And when they want to get involved in the discussions and they don't have a decent understanding of the arguments, they're going to get trounced upon, right? So, but not everybody wants to do that. Most of the people we have in the community are just watchers. They watch, they listen, they participate in the live feed. Yeah. The vast majority, right? Out of the great debate community and the skeptic community that we belong to, which is, I would put like the Legion of Doom and the Legion of what's the other one? What's the other side called? Do you remember?
The Apologetic League.
Apologetic League, thank you. That community type thing, right? I think that probably, I would say only a handful of people that participate are the actual ones that go into the Hangouts and talk about it, which is fine. But if people want to dive into that and they want to become active in that, I'm all for that, and I want to help them, and I think everybody in the community would want to help them. But they have to get back some of the basics. They have to get past that, what they've thought were right all along. They have to get past that because it's not true. You cannot know something without believing it, and that's something you've got to move past.
The other thing that I talked about. The caveat that I wanted to provide here too is that if we still want to have these sort of conversations across the aisle with our theist friends, it's in our interest to have an agreed upon language, even if we're using it differently, right? Like we could say that faith is an unjustified assumption, right? But belief is a necessary constitutive element of knowledge, or whatever the case is, we can define it. But if we're going to continue to talk across the aisle, we've got to be able to use the same kind of language that they do. Otherwise, we're going to open up a whole new problem of talking past one another.
Oh my God, you're so right. You're so right.
Yeah, and that's where the interesting conversations are being had right now. I mean, I think it's a great time to be an atheist because this sort of like pushback by the theists has encouraged a lot more philosophically minded theists to get involved in these discussions. And if theists are stepping up their philosophy game, then that means the atheists got to meet them at the table. And I think excluding things from our language is just going to hurt us in the end.
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect example of that. And this, again, I'm not disparaging either of these debaters. I think they did very well from their own personal experience, and it's no fault of their own. But I knew what was going to happen. But when you had Holy Kool-Aid against Greg Geiler, they were on totally different pages because they were using different understandings of words, different definitions. And even more so, conceptually, they were on a different page. And you cannot have a discussion like that. So I think you're absolutely right. If you don't have to agree with the theist uses of the words, but you have to understand how they use it, and then you have to understand how it's used in philosophy. And if both parties know those two things, they can have a discussion. They don't have to agree. They can say, look, I prefer my use of the word, and you prefer your use. Okay, but as you use it, I know how you're using it. As I'm using it, you know how I'm using it. You can have a conversation. But I think you're exactly right. Theists have stepped up their game a lot when it comes to philosophy. And the atheist who sits there and says, look, I've had how many people on Twitter tell me philosophy is useless? Philosophy is, it's going to die out.
That's just nonsense. That's just these are people and I want to say that when somebody disparages philosophy like that, I have to wonder, like, what shitty public university they went to, what kind of low-grade professors they had.
Not to mention, philosophy is, in its most basic sense, philosophy is just thinking about how to think. If you don't know, if you can't articulate why you think something, then you don't even need a philosophy 101 book to do that. But that you're still using philosophy.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, sir. I'm gonna put I'll put a theist hat on real quick. So I'm the theist, and here I have. Let's say I'm looking at you, and and you tell me, and I'm not saying you would, but you tell me philosophy is dying out. Philosophy is useless. Blah blah blah. As a theist, I'd be like, this is not an atheist I want to have a conversation with, because they're not even at a level to have a conversation, because they don't even know. Like you just said, they don't even know how to think. They don't even know how to think.
Philosophy is just thinking about how to think in its most basic form. It's thinking about thinking. You do it all the time, whether you call it philosophy or not.
I agree. And I'm telling you, I had to learn this lesson the hard way. And I want people to maybe learn from my mistake. People know 4 years ago how bad I was at philosophy. I sucked bad because I didn't have an appreciation for the terminology. And it wasn't until, the PAL talkers started coming around, I'm like, fuck, I have no idea what these people are talking about, but they seem to know what they're talking about. And it piqued my curiosity, because I have thought about things I never in my life ever had to think about. You think I ever had to look at a theory of knowledge growing up? No.
No, definitely not.
Never. I didn't take philosophy in college. Never was exposed to it. I had no idea. If you would have said, hey, Steve, what's the difference between inflationary theory and correspondence? I have no freaking idea. And I did it back then. I had no idea. I was just like, I don't know what the hell these words mean.
No, the most I've been able to learn from philosophy has been, strictly my own reading on my own time in the past, month and a half, maybe?
It's a start, though. It's a start. And look, I'm not saying everybody has to be a great philosopher. I'm of all people, I suck at these things. I'm a layperson, but I enjoy it, and I think that I can at least get to impart a willingness to learn. That's the most I can do, because I can't teach people philosophy. I don't know well enough to teach, but I can be as influential as I can to explain to people. I do believe 100% you need an understanding of these topics and philosophy if you want to engage on a certain level. You just do.
Yeah, and I think I agree with everything that's been said thus far. And I think the community really took a hit when Dr. Garrett Merriam left. And speaking of teaching, when he left to go teach at South Bend, Indiana University, the YouTube community lost a really good source of philosophy in him. And I think since then, the atheist side of the debate has not been philosophically minded. All the while, the theists have been stepping up their game, right? And there's people like Wade, I think Histhammer is his name. These are guys that are just pound for pound some of the best theists that walk in our community, that sort of mingle in our community. And there's maybe a handful of people who can meet him at the same table. I'd like to see that change. I'd like to see a lot of people get involved in philosophy, understand these topics more, so that we can have more interesting conversations and just meet these people on their level.
I think what'll happen. I mean, do you remember when the preceptors came around, right?
Yeah.
People stepped up. I myself included. I learned the arguments. I practiced at it. I practiced arguing against preceptors. I think most people on a general level can do it now, but I still see every so often, a person. I'll go watch a video, a person who doesn't understand it, and the preceptor will roll all over them, just rickroll them, because they're buying into the approach they're taking. They don't know the defeaters, right? And they're so. It's still one of those things that if you want to engage on that level, you need to know how to defeat these people, especially when it comes to epistemics, because the whole point of presuppositional argumentation, the Side 10 clone version, is relying on the fact that the interlocutor they're having a conversation with doesn't understand these topics.
And it's so easy to defeat, too.
It's really not that hard, no. Right.
The Pal Talkers have been discussing making like a 15 to 20 minute video that just walks the white belt atheist through the argument, and then on each step just shows them the defeater. Mm-hmm. That way,
that'd be awesome.
That'd be really good.
Yeah,
they could put that on my channel. If they want to put that on my channel, if they need, I'll mirror it at least.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, but the reason why that would be useful is because the precept argument is dead. I mean, Side 10, when was the last time Side 10 Bruggencate spoke publicly?
The precept, why the precept?
A long time.
I will give credit where credit is due. The reason why you do not hear much about presuppositional argumentation any longer is because of the Pal Talkers and other people. And I'm going to put myself in that because I've argued many times against preceptors. The group of us, we fought against it. And
that's right.
And people that watch these videos,
the FSX days and stuff like that. That was when you and FSX were going hard.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. I remember him. There was a few other people too, but we would have these conversations, and people would watch and go, "Yeah, that the preceptor, God, that guy's an idiot." I mean, look at Darwin's, right? When we made Darwin's look like an idiot, which is not terribly difficult to do if you have a little bit of understanding. It's fun though. Not gonna lie, It is fun. People go, holy shit. This guy Darwin's is just a fucking moron. I mean, the guy has a whole channel dedicated to him, and Darwin's greatest hits is the greatest person in the world to defeat Darwin's arguments. That's right. And I know I'm pretty sure on this, he has a hell of an education, to say the least, on these topics. So.
Yeah, I think she does. Yeah.
Well, it's there's I think there's I'm not going to go into details, but
right.
Yeah.
No, I know. What
are you referring to Hypatia, by the way? Do you know? Remember?
I thought we weren't.
Well, no, Hypatia was. You can mention. No, you can mention Hypatia. Hypatia was an avatar that came in. You can mention Hypatia.
Yeah,
she was around for a while.
I'd just rather not go into it. Yeah. But the idea about Darwin's, right? Darwin's only becomes interesting, or these cyclone or Bonson clones only become interesting when you allow them to drag you on, like walk you on a leash. You just answer their questions, right? But you answer them in such a way that you're just taking them off a cliff.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't let them diverge from the script, you can actually take their script for a ride, and people notice that, people see that, but it's so dead, right? What people want to talk about anymore isn't Side 10 Bruggencate or Van Til or Greg Bonson. They're not talking about that philosophically. These theists are. They're talking about people like Plantinga. They're talking about Molinism, William Lane Craig, and stuff like that. And I'm really afraid that our community, by and large, doesn't understand these topics such that we can have debate, decent debates with theists.
And that's the problem too, because look at for example, like even when I say like William Lane Craig, he has one argument that I think is good, and that's his argument on against the presumption of atheism from Anthony Flew. I think it's a good argument, and yet people say, "Oh, well, you're siding with an atheist." Well, so what? I mean, that just because you're a theist doesn't mean that all your arguments have to be bad. I'm against the presumption of atheism. I think that paper was crap to begin with, and it was overwhelmingly rejected in 1971 from philosophers because it was shit. And so, if William Lane Craig has a good argument about it, so the atheist. The atheist didn't like it either. So,
well, the other thing that I noticed too is that what theists have been doing is they've been dragging out like this old BS, right? Like the Alexander Pruss and Pierce articles about definitions of omnipotence. And the atheist, the white belt atheist, who run-of-the-mill atheist, doesn't know how to deal with that, right? They're like, oh, they'll just let them define it, right? They'll just let them like run an ontological argument any which way they want without knowing how to head it off. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to see people get back to actual syllogisms and arguments, providing some sort of argument against God. Right?
As long as we don't do any more Kalams. No more Kalam. No more Kalam.
I agree.
Because, oh my God. Matt, what was his name? Matt Bell and his Kalam. 260 versions of the Kalam.
Well, there's more interesting arguments, right? Like Jack's arguments against God having having intentional states. You know, that's an argument that I've never heard outside Pal Talkers. I don't think I've heard it once in the GDC community, except by Alex Malpass.
I've heard him. I've heard him run it before, but I haven't seen it formulated. I've heard Jack run that argument before.
Yeah, it's anybody can run it. It's really easy. Premise one: God cannot fail. Right. So immediately we're defeating any kind of notion of omnipotence. Right? If they want to try and define omnipotence in such a way that avoids omnipotence paradoxes like Mahir, we're already defeating that. All they have to deny here is that God can fail. If God cannot fail, which the theist is going to want to commit to, then they have to accept the premise. And then premise two is failure is constitutive of normativity. Right? In order to be an agent, you have to have the ability to fail. Doesn't mean that you fail. You could always be successful, but just the ability to fail is required for being an agent. And it's in virtue of that conclusion, God only has dispositional states. And if he only has dispositional states, he becomes a mechanism like lightning.
Yeah,
we don't say that lightning fails to hit the barn, right? Lightning just hits a barn.
I think the conclusion from that would be that God, if God exists, he's not an agent of any kind. He is just.
Well, see, that's it. We're off air, right?
No, well, we're still on air.
No, we're still on air.
Yep. He's running it through his stream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't. Then there's something to be had there that probably ought not be said publicly.
Okay.
But I'll message.
Okay, no worries. But yeah, no, I definitely think there's a lot of other arguments out there that people don't know about, and I think there's a lot of arguments even from the theist side that people should be aware of. Where the other day, I think it was her name Heather had mentioned like the Aquinas five-way, right? And those the foundation of classical theism. So people should have at least a basic understanding of what they are and how to defeat them. Or at least provide counter arguments to it, especially when it comes to first cause arguments, ontological arguments, prime mover. What is some of your biggest defeaters as far as, let's say I ran the argument of ontological, that God is the uncaused cause, the prime mover. We cannot have anything in motion without an initial thing moving it. So he's the first mover.
Again, I would just ask why one ought to accept that. I would just need a demonstration for that, right? Why even give them that first premise? You know, that's where we should be going, is we should be asking them to demonstrate these things.
As opposed to just granting that the premises are true and then trying to defeat it afterwards.
Well, they would just say that they would just say that all things, tend to stay in motion when it's exerted by an outside exerted force, or that things will remain not in motion, right? Things will move until you have a force exerted on it.
Well, we could just move to atemporal causation being an incoherent concept. There's all kinds of ways to address this.
And that's a good thing too. How do you have a causal being that affects our timeline that's outside of space-time? There's no temporal causation there.
just demonstrate the premise. That's all I want them to do is demonstrate the premise, and we can't move the premise to until that's done. That's
what do you mean by demonstrate the premise? If the premise is that nothing can be put in, nothing can change motion unless acted upon, that's physics.
Yeah, sure, but there's all kinds of unknowns there, right? There's all kinds of unknowns, so I'm not going to say that this is some sort of universally applicable law.
Oh,
right?
okay.
We could just...
okay, you're taking it as these laws are not immutable.
Right. I mean, well, again, we would have to talk about the PSR again, right? You know, I mean,
I don't accept PSR.
Right. There's reasons to reject this sort of like infinite causal chain.
Is that where you would come from, though? Is that where you would come from? Would you take it from the position of, you have to assume certain things like a causal chain, PSR. If you deny those things, then that premise falls apart. Because you don't need a prime mover right. if you don't have a causal chain like that.
Well, we talked about, talking about causality and the PSR are sort of two different topics, but theists treat it like it's the same, and there's objections to the PSR that result in modal collapse.
PSR is a collection of things. It's not just one thing.
Right.
So, yeah. And I agree they conflate PSR with specifically with causation. And it's like, no, when you're talking about reason, principle of sufficient reasons, there is multiple different things. And I think that a lot of people do think that it's more like, okay, affect A cause B. And it's a lot more complicated than that. It's much more than just an interrelationship between cause and effect.
But see,
is there a reason for something to happen?
But see, all these sort of, like the modal ontological argument, right? Like Plantinga's modal ontological argument. Even Plantinga admits that these things shouldn't have force for the unbeliever, right? William Lane Craig says
they're not for the unbeliever; they're for the believer to keep them believing.
That's right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The point that I'm making is that so Plantinga says that modal ontological argument shouldn't have force to the unbeliever. William Lane Craig even says that in critiquing presuppositionalism, says that the sort of circularity shouldn't convince an unbeliever, right? They recognize bad arguments when they see them, or they say there might be a valid argument, right? But the unbeliever has no reason to accept some of the premises in the argument, and if that's the case, then you just challenge them on those premises.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think you don't have to accept the premises. There's some of these premises are not like they have to be the case. I mean, if I have premise 1 + 1 = 2, then I think you're kind of dumb to say I don't accept premise 1, right? 1 + 1 = 2. That's a true premise. But some of these other premises you don't have to accept them for very good reasons. But do you think that somebody like William Lane Craig will use something like a modal ontological argument, because it's not a very easy argument. I mean, you have to understand things like possible worlds, and you have to understand what modal is. But do you think that he uses them because the believer says, you know what, here's a really erudite guy, this guy's really smart, he's running a really sophisticated argument, ergo, it's probably true to them?
Well, I think there's two things in a debate, right? One, it's performance art for the audience. Mm-hmm. Right, so they're just meeting that confirmation bias need, and then two, how they're perceived in this like joust with the non-believer, right? So Greg Bahnsen was really brilliant about avoiding questions, right, or phrasing questions in such a way that didn't answer a direct question, but sort of did the turn in the debate to turn it back on the non-believer.
I have no idea what that's like. It's not like we have people.
Oh no!
Well, not like there's a video on that with a bunch of questions that they had non-answers to.
Nah.
I totally did not participate in a live debate with any of them. That didn't happen. I don't exist.
and I got to be wrapping this up soon because my roommate's going to be coming home soon. But I got to tell you, I loved that live discussion we had the other day on the Non Sequitur with 18 people in the Skype call. You only saw like 8, 9, 10 people, I think you only saw. But there's 18 people in that call, and that was a clusterfuck, to say the least. But we got it all under control, and they did a wonderful job. It was organized. It was really organized. And I don't mean clusterfuck as in like it really was messed up. It was a lot of people wanted to have a say. And matter of fact, myself and Kyle, our questions weren't even addressed because we wanted to get everybody else to. I will be addressing to theists out there my question and why I think almost all the questions didn't understand the question. There was only 2 that kind of did. I think Brass had and I don't want to say good answers, but not bad answers, and IP. But their answers, there's still problems with their answers. IP's answer wasn't wrong, but there's still problems with it. And so I'm going to be either having my own hangout on that particular question with people, and we can do that, or if we do it on the Non Sequitur show and invite them in, I'm happy with that. I don't know what Kyle wants to do. But I do want to address my question, which was, if you're going to posit a God as a explanation for things, then you need to posit how he did it mechanistically, right? And I didn't mean it with a science approach, right? And you could do that. You could say, you could say, look, in science we have mechanisms, okay, but I didn't want to take it back all the way to a grounding level, some kind of reductionism of, okay, I'm grounding it by God. My point was more along the lines of suppose somebody that didn't accept evolution. If you want to posit God as an explanation for human existence and why we're here, as far as physical, there's two ways you can look at it existentially why we're here. You can look at metaphysically, you can look at it, biologically or physically why we're here. But if you're going to posit God for either of those, you still need a mechanism by which he did it. And if you look at it from the biological approach, which is fine, you can interpret the question that way, and you say, okay, it was done by evolution. Okay, I agree it was done by evolution, but then why is the explanation now God? God does no longer add anything to that explanation. God is non-explanative at that point, because you're not adding anything to the explanation of why we're here. You're just adding in an unnecessary thing that you're positing that adds no other information to the system. Because look at God, adding God doesn't tell you how he did it, doesn't tell you why he did it, doesn't tell you the reasons that he did it. It gives you no more value to posit a God over just evolution.
But Steve, you're just supposed to accept that God is mysterious and move on.
Hey, look at, I'm agnostic, and I don't care if somebody posits God to do that, right?
God evolved.
I don't think I'm not saying it's wrong to do it. I'm not out there going, look at, don't posit God as a grounding explanation for everything. If you want to do that, that's your belief. I got no issue with it. But you cannot say rationally to me that positing God as an explanation over the explanations we do have adds anything to that explanation. To me, it just doesn't.
Look, I would like to see atheists challenge the theists more on this idea that God is a coherent hypothesis, right? Like, in virtue, just ask, in virtue of what is it indistinguishable from a null hypothesis in any case,
I get that.
It's saying, look, if your God is said to have a material effect on the world, just name the material effect such that it could be tested and observed. If not, tell me how this hypothesis is distinguishable from a null hypothesis, and in virtue of what are you rational for believing?
I totally agree with you, and I totally disagree with you. And let me tell you why I say that. I know that's a contradiction. I get that. I'm being funny here. I agree. If this was a science thing, you'd be actually right. I mean, but I don't think you can take God and put him in a scientific experiment, because science doesn't deal with that. I think that what you just said does fall under scientism. Literally falls under scientism. I think you're misappropriating the scientific method where you cannot use it.
Well, that's the point, right? They're just going to call category error.
It is a category error.
They're going to say, look, it's a category error. Right. So then all I mean to say is that this is a platform for the next step, which is, okay, so it's a category error to examine God empirically. In what way can we examine him? And move to some sort of non-inferential justification or experiential and procedural knowledge. And then boom, we're right there talking about epistemology, which is a place where we've got to go with theists.
Yeah, and I'm good with that, right? And I think that's, if you want to have those discussions, that is the good place to go. But I'm going to bring this up with somebody I haven't talked about in ages, but I think it's appropriate in this particular regard. I leave other channels to talk about this particular person because I think it's a waste of time anymore. But our old friend True Empiricism. He is a king and not understanding. Positing a God for an abductive argument doesn't get you anywhere. And first of all, he doesn't know what the word abduction means, because an abductive argument is not how he uses it. It's just not. It's not. An abductive argument is the best explanation for something based upon past observations. But He thinks God is just the best explanation because of his belief system. That's not making it a best explanation. And even if it was the case, what does it explain? If I say, if you, for example, ask me any question you want, just serious, give me, say, hey Steve, what's the explanation for this? Just make something up.
Hey Steve, what's the explanation for the existence of pigeons?
You know, pigeons exist because of God. Did I explain anything to you?
No, you just said because God done it.
If you said, hey, I dropped this, it fell to the ground. My explanation, God. Okay,
but by what mechanisms did God do that?
Oh, well, I could say gravity, but then again, okay, everything I need to know is described by gravity.
But by what mechanisms did God create gravity?
Well, but that pushes it back to a different level, and that's not the question. The question is, what's the explanation? When we were asking for an explanation, we are looking for something to explain what we're talking about, right? We're not asking for grounding. People confuse this reductionism approach that if I'm asking for an explanation of why things fell, the explanation is gravity. The explanation is not who created gravity.
Yes.
Right.
You know? And so that I think
right.
Hang on one second. If I say, "Hey, heretic woman, why does an airplane fly?" You could tell me that aerodynamically it does this, and you can tell me all that.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it you say, "Well, it flies because we had engineers that built this system and put these together, and it has avionics here that put into the system and does." No, we don't give a shit about the engineers that why it flies. We give a shit about the physics why it flies.
Getting even pickier, you know, well, this specific engineer named Roger designed this, and then he submitted it to
because he turned a bolt here and he put these wires together. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they don't add anything to the explanations. But again, those are not what we're trying to explain. Explanation and cause are two different things. People always seem to get those confused. Theists especially like true empiricism, he confuses cause and explanation. Vastly different things.
Well, that's like when people ask, like when theists ask me, well, why are you here? And I'll say, because my parents had sex. And then, well, how did their parents get here? Because they fucked too, and their parents and their, you know, but they keep wanting to get to the point where I don't have an answer. I'm like, my answer is always going to be some creature reproduced with another creature.
Well, so we can always go back until the point where we go, you know, there was a single-celled hunting organism and a single-celled prey organism, and it just so happened that when the hunter organism ingested the prey organism, instead of digesting it, they actually had a symbiotic relationship and created the first multi-celled organism.
Yeah.
And also, though, I mean, I had theists have done this before. They'll say, well, where did that come from? Or where did that come from? And you know they're just going to go all the way back to grounding problems again. But it's simple to get around that grounding problem. Look, if somebody says to ask you a question about something like T equals 0 or the Big Bang or, you know, what multiverse, and you don't know, just say, you know, I don't know. But then look at them and say, you know what?
Yeah.
You don't know either, motherfucker, because if you did, you would be famous.
You know, you don't think that, Steve, that's going to invite theists, like I typed in the chat to you there, to take a particularist view? They're going to say that they start with what they know, not how they know it.
Yeah, no, they do that, and I hate that approach. Because the people that start with a predetermined presupposition that God exists is very hard to have conversations with, because they at that point have excused themselves from actually being ability to reason and to look objectively at anything.
Well, then what you need to do is make it clear. Look, we're in this conversation talking about Methodism. We're talking about the methods that you can come to know something to be true, right? And the methods that you can believe things which are true. And I think that will sort of act as a filter for this sort of presuppositionalist and particularist type theist.
I think so, yeah. But like I said, I still think it's not that hard to get around those grounding problems, because, you know, they want to say, well, where did the universe come from? Well, you know what? I have no idea. That's been a problem with philosophy for a long time.
When a mommy and a daddy god love each other very much.
But see, again, though, all they're doing is They're positing something. Okay, well,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying they can't. This is the problem. I don't think it's wrong to posit a God for the existence of everything. That is the grounding. I personally don't have issue with it. I know other people do, but if you want to take a reformed epistemological approach, like Plantinga's reformed epistemology or whatever, I don't have a big deal with it. I just don't. Other people do, fine. But it still doesn't explain anything really. It's a possible.
No.
It's a possible thing, sure. But what does it explain? It doesn't tell you anything about why we are here. God created us. Okay, why?
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, right? It's
Who the hell knows?
reformed epistemology is ad hoc, and because it can only explain this one thing, and people tuck this particular belief, saying it's properly basic.
No,
right?
and I disagree I disagree with Plantinga. There's no way reformed epistemology is properly basic. There's just no way.
Right. No, I get it, but that's the answer to your question, right? It's done in an ad hoc manner.
Yeah, I agree.
They're just formulating these sorts of epistemologies or these sorts of ways about thinking about the external world so that they can explain a belief that they'd rather have than not.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, I don't think it's irrational, and that's why I diverge. Do I accept it? No. If I did, I would accept RE as a theory of justification for myself. I don't. But do I think it's irrational to hold a particular position on a theist position like God exists? No, not at all. And I think if somebody wants to use reformed epistemology to try to justify it, I'm okay with that. Do I think it works successfully? Not so much. But hopefully in this upcoming discussion we have on it, we're going to have some good argument and counter argument on that. Hopefully. But I'm still working on that, guys. So
yeah, we need to because the reason why I say that it's pertinent to have this discussion is because it's being had elsewhere. Like I told you, Steve, and I think that
we are live. We are live, so careful.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying that other people are planning to have this discussion between folks, and I would like to see the non sequitur show pick it up, or at least you, if you have to do it by yourself, pick it up.
No, I definitely think
because it's going to garner a lot of attention in the next few weeks.
I definitely think Kyle wants to have a discussion. I will talk to him tonight before our show tonight because I think we probably need to rethink the people having that discussion a little bit. But yeah, and I know. Sorry, go ahead. Perfect.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I still think we need to have a I believe in Steve campaign and rehabilitate.
Well, that sounds weird because that means again I believe in somebody.
I know.
I have confidence in them.
I thought of that and I'm like, how do you word that so it sounds cool but doesn't mean it that way?
How about we end it with this? And by the way, I want to thank the three of you for joining me. I'm having smaller hangouts because I like having smaller hangouts. I'm finding having 10 people on some types of discussion like this are just. They're not easy, and I think that having a very small group like this is much more entertaining to me, at least, and I'm hoping to the audience. And we get a lot of stuff out. We get a lot more deeper into stuff than the superficial. Because when we have 10 people, it goes down 10 different tangents, right?
Yeah.
So this stays more on focus. Let's leave it with this. Look, if you think, well, excuse me, I don't want to use the word think. If you believe if you do not believe that I exist, leave a comment in the video description and let me know why it is. And I want to make it very clear: believe, think, those are not the same thing. And I don't want to equivocate the two. There's a very specific reason why I'm using the word belief, because belief is an epistemic word. It has to do with epistemology. There's a whole field of understanding of why we have beliefs, the reasons we have beliefs, called dosastic logic. It is a legit form of logic. So when people avoid that word belief, they're eliminating a whole form of logic. They're eliminating all of epistemics. And so I don't know why people have this strange aversion to the word belief. And so if you don't, first of all, if you believe that I don't exist, that I really want to know, because you are a solipsist. If you believe that I don't exist, you're a fucking solipsist. I don't know how you can get around with that. Unless you think that I'm the only other mind that doesn't exist and everybody else's minds does. So we're going to call that a selective solipsist?
Well, maybe they just think you're a bot.
It's selective solipsistic anti-realism.
There you go. That's good. Selective solipsistic anti-realism. We started a new thing here. I like that. I'm going to use that. Selective. I can say that too. Selective solipsistic anti-realism. There we go. Close enough. But if you believe that I exist, hey, then we're on board. But if you don't believe that I exist, then I really want to hear from you, because I just think it's an untenable position. And I think that you are being irrational if you cannot say you have a belief that I exist, or you can't believe 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, because it sounds, if you take the proposition and you change it from I exist to something else, like I do not believe 1 + 1 = 2, people are going to think you're a math idiot, right? So instead of saying I do not believe Steve's exists, you just change Steve's exists to 1 + 1 = 2. How many people are going to say I do not believe 1 + 1 = 2? I just find that to be weird, because if you want to say that you don't have beliefs, that's what you're going to end up doing. You're going to end up saying I do not believe 1 + 1 = 2, because you're not having any beliefs according to you, right? So. We're going to leave this with Abad asking, ask Ronnie how selective solipsistic anti-realism works. He's a master of that topic. We will do that. We will do that. Nice. In fact, I'll tell you what, if Ronnie can actually explain the difference between moral anti-realism and moral realism, I would be impressed. Or even just realism and anti-realism. They are two different things as well. I would be really impressed, because I don't think he has any idea. So, anyways, I'm taking this off air. We have the non sequitur show tonight. We've got something on Babylonian or mythos kind of stuff that we'll be talking about, and that's going to be at 5 o'clock Pacific time tonight, or 8 o'clock Eastern. So join us then. And